Hi, my name is Mackenzie Tierney, and I'm doing this persuasive speech on the trauma of children. Now, what this speech is going to focus on is the different types of trauma children have, as well as what the definition of trauma is and some warning signs and how you can help prevent it. So, the definition of trauma. Trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience that can later lead to mental health problems or physical problems. Or also the classic definition of trauma is physical injury. Now, I'm only going to list 5 different types of traumatic experiences that can happen with children because there's over 15, and these are the most popular. The first one would be sexual abuse, which is an actual or attempted sexual act with a child, either done by a parent or a relative family member. And obviously the sexual act is not wanted. The next one is a physical abuse or assault, which it can either be as some sort of corporal punishment, or it can actually be with a weapon that is with an intent of hurting a child. The next one is emotional abuse or psychological maltreatment of a child, which is using mental tactics against the child, which is like when, let's say for instance, the child doesn't bring home grades that are good enough, the parent will stand there and scream at the child saying that they're a horrible kid and all this stuff. Or it can go on the extreme opposite act of it. They could lock the kid in the closet because of something that they've done, and that's also kind of an emotional part of it as well. Then there's also neglect, which is failure by a parent or a caregiver or grandparent or whatever to take care of that child. So it could be lack of hygiene, lack of food, lack of safe place for them to leave, or it could also lead on the physical neglect of it as well. And then, of course, there's your serious accident, which could be your car accident, a child jumping off the deep end of the pool and hitting their head at the bottom of it, or so on, that leads into an actual physical injury that the child otherwise might not have had suffered. So some signs of trauma in infants would be eating disturbances, so the child would not want to eat, or they would eat too much and throw it up. Sleeping disturbances, sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, clingy or separation anxiety, so when the caregiver that they know is a safe person leaves, they freak out, they start like throwing a fit, the feeling of helplessness, also irritable difficulty to soothe, constricted play, exploration or mood, and language delay. So normally children at the age of 2 start to talk, but with kids who have suffered trauma, it can be very difficult for them to even express these feelings until very later on in life, and it also can make them not even speak at all until they're about 5 or 6 years of age. Some signs of trauma in young children, which is the general fearfulness of new surroundings, helplessness, passive, low frustration, or they can even be on the opposite end of it, hyperactive, impulsive, reckless. So they can be the kids in your classroom that are sound asleep, or the kids in your classroom that have ADD, and you can't just go write these kids off because you don't really understand problems where they're coming from. They can have severe aggressive behavior, so they could be biting other kids, or they could even be hitting other kids. Sexualized behavior, because they don't understand what was done to them, so they think it's socially acceptable to do that to somebody else. A loss of developmental achievements and reproductive post-traumatic play, so they like to reenact the trauma they've suffered. Now, trauma can affect children's developmental stages in several different ways, such as difficulty in trusting others, uncertain about new people, they have interpersonal difficulty, they're very socially isolated because they've been hurt their entire life and they think everybody is like that. Difficulty seeking help, clingy, and difficulty with separations. And then they can also sort, on the other side of things, they have effects on the physical development, which is like they have problems with the sensorimotor development problems, hypersensitivity to physical contact. Too much stimulation can scare them, or they can put them in a state of shock. They have increased medical problems, so because of these triggers that have happened, they can keep happening over and over again. They also have problems with coordination and balance. Another one is the behavioral control development. So they have poor impulse control, they have poor self-esteem, they're very destructive. So often these are the kids that are cutting themselves or have eating disorders or staying up super late or binge eating because of the trauma they've experienced. They can have sleeping disorders. They can be overly compliant. So if you ask them to do something, they'll go and do it extremely well because they want to please you. They want the positive reinforcement. They can also have pathological self-soothing practices, which is a way that they've helped figure out how to cope with the trauma. And most of the times these aren't the positive ways. These are the negative ways because they don't know how else to do it. And then they can also have reenactment of trauma and of the post-trauma and then the actual traumatic event. And then there's also the development on the cognition. So as studying to be a teacher, this is kind of difficult because often those kids who have the learning disabilities, like these kids with trauma suffer, could be because of the trauma. They have developmental delays, they have problems with language, they have a lack of sustained curiosity, problems processing new information, difficulty planning and anticipating the consequences because they've only seen the consequences as bad. They've never seen the consequences as a good thing, so they do not know how to react to that. And also difficulty paying attention. So you could be giving a lesson in the classroom and a child can be completely off in the middle of nowhere, and it's very hard for them to focus because they don't see the good in what could happen. And so how can you help? You can help tell a parent about a therapist if you think that's necessary. Offer the person support. Don't push them into talking about the situation because we don't know where they're coming from and we don't know how bad it could be. And don't take it personally for what could happen, how they react to you, because we don't know their trauma, and oftentimes we will never understand their trauma. And you can also help them to figure out a positive way to socialize, help be there with them when they go socialize for the first time, and also help them find a positive way to relax. And that's it. Thank you.